Yo, how you doing, man?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
Good, good. I'm dressed in all black for Drake's funeral today.
Of course.
So it's taken a lot for me to get pulled away from the phone,
Yeah.
just watching disc
No, it's
reactions
it's
and
it's
waiting for
been
the next drop. And
this has
you
been me
know,
for the last like 17 hours. Like,
yeah, I'm fired up, man. It's so
no,
exciting.
this is
It's
it's
so
awesome.
exciting. This is a tough sell right now, but we're gonna get into it, man. We're super excited to talk football, and I'm actually just
Oh
fired
yeah.
up in general. So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Fuck yeah, let's do it, man. What do you want to talk about first?
Um, I feel like the dust has settled from the draft now,
Yeah, thank
and
God.
yeah, it's been a lot. And I think when we did a reaction to the draft, and we did
Hmm.
some content that we filmed during the draft, but I think for me it's always important to like let the cake bake for a week or two and kind of settle into like what are you looking at, what do you think now that we know where everybody is. um, what are the implications this year? What are the implications for these teams and their careers? And this was kind of heralded as the offensive draft of all offensive drafts, particularly at QB and receiver. And I don't think we've ever seen, what was it, the first 14 picks, the first 13 picks, straight
Yeah, I think
offense?
Lot. I think Latu was the 15th pick.
Right.
So
So it would
yeah,
have been the first 14 picks were all offense, and there were some tackles mixed in, but it was
yeah,
predominantly quarterback, receiver, and then a couple of tackles. So I think on that note, I really want to start off with discussing the quarterbacks, kind of like
mm-hmm.
getting into who's your favorite QB that got drafted, where he got drafted, and then also like who's a guy that nobody's talking about that you think might make an impact at
Sure,
some point. Yeah.
perfect. Do you want me to take it?
Yeah, go ahead,
Because I
brother.
got a guy. All right,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Dive in, baby.
you know what I mean. I'm jumping in,
Yeah.
baby. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I think so. Okay, so I think it's interesting because I feel like we've talked to death about like just not particularly you and I, but I think just as a whole, like as a football fan base as a whole, as a media as a whole, we've kind of talked Caleb Williams to death. Like we know, okay, it's a good situation, you know, like oh, it's the
Yeah.
best situation a
Yeah.
first round pick has ever, a first round draft pick has ever been. You know, okay, maybe we'll see. Um, so I don't really want to talk Caleb at all because I think Caleb might be the obvious. To be honest with you, it's like you
Hmm.
get you get those three elite wide receivers, you get a pretty revamped team. Like we all get it, and I think Jaden Daniels has kind of gotten that to a lesser degree. Um,
Right.
Drake May I think has gotten a lot of hate, like rightfully so. They don't have a lot of pieces in New England. It's going to be a rough
Hmm.
start. JJ McCarthy, same thing. I feel like we've talked to death about all these quarterbacks, and then obviously like the Michael Penix thing, where it was like, oh my god, like what were they thinking? And we touched on that in our like we dropped a clip about that in our last week, and
Yeah.
I think nobody on like it's seemingly nobody on earth is talking about Bo Nix, and I think Bo Nix is the
Yeah.
most. I feel like he's the most NFL ready. I think
Hmm.
he's had five different coordinators. If I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's been five different
Yeah.
coordinators in the last
Yeah.
five
And a
years.
bunch more if you go back to high school with his dad. And
Has
yes, a
yeah
ton.
has
Yeah.
always like struggled a little bit at Auburn, but not terribly. Stuck around, stuck it out, got better, perfected his craft. Absolutely
Hmm.
balled out last year, like objectively balled out. Just ran into Michael Penix twice, and frankly, Washington was a better team, and they went toe
Close
to toe with
games.
them two
Yep.
times. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Close games. Close
Um,
games.
and if you look at all four of those other quarterback, or I guess JJ aside, you look at Caleb going to Chicago, defensive head coach. Jaden Daniels to Washington, defensive head coach. Drake May to New England, defensive head coach. So Kevin O'Connell is good, but we don't really know what he is. We think he's kind of he's tall McVay if you're Colin Cowherd, but it's like he hasn't really
Right.
shown that. You know what I mean? Like he's definitely a good coach because we saw him win with like the lukewarm body of Josh Dobbs last year in a game
Yeah.
that semi mattered. So
Yeah.
that's impressive. But Josh Dobbs is also like one of the most intelligent players to ever come into the NFL. Like I feel like that gets swept under the rug a lot when that point gets made.
He's a rocket scientist.
He's a rocket, like literally a rocket
Yeah.
scientist. Like he can
That didn't
figure
get
out a
swept under the rug this year, by the way. Take a
no, no,
shot
no,
every
no,
time
it
you heard
didn't.
that
No,
when
it
you
didn't.
played. We
Oh
know. We
man,
got it.
I'd
There's
be
his
dead.
parents. They're scientists. We got it. We got it. We got it.
So if I'm a rookie quarterback, do I want to go play for, you know, Matt Eberflus, or not Bob? What's his name? Dan Quinn.
Quinn. Yep.
Dan Quinn. What is it? Gerard Mayo? Is that the
Rod Mayo, yep, in New England.
Yeah. Or do I want to go play with Sean Payton? And you tell me. You know what I mean? You tell me.
Point.
Granted, now I think you can counter argue that a bit with the Commanders having Cliff Kingsbury, but let's not act like he's been incredibly successful. You know what I mean? Like he's worked with some elite talents. He's worked with Patrick Mahomes, Caleb Williams, Kyler Murray. Like he's worked with some really great talents. But
Johnny,
it's never Johnny. Yeah, Johnny was probably the most success he had with a single talent, right? You know.
Yeah.
And so I think when you look at Bo Nix, I feel like everybody's just being like, oh God, like they took the last guy, and it's like, yeah, potentially, but that could work out in their favor. I think it might be the best situation. Again, Caleb's probably the best situation on paper, but again, he still has a defensive head coach. He still has a defensive-minded head coach, and I don't love their offensive coordinator situation where, I tend to believe Sean Payton is kind of the offensive coordinator in Denver.
Absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what the deal is. That's why him and Russ did not get along ever. And granted, I don't think Denver has a ton of weapons, but I think they have a serviceable team. And I think Bo Nix strikes me as the type of kid that Sean Payton can just be like, hey, shut up and learn. And he'll be like, yes, sir. Absolutely. You know what I mean? So like
there's a breeze element to him with both the play style, the size, the traits, and the personality, right? There's like
I totally agree.
I mean,
and I think that's why he was taken, right? I think that's why he was taken. So
I do too.
So I don't know. I mean, I think, and I'm not saying he's going to be some like world beater, some like unbelievable talent. No, but I do think we could look at the end of the season, however many months it is from now, and be like, I guess I should say I wouldn't be like too terribly shocked if Bo Nix is like your rookie of the year, right? Like probably wouldn't be, just because of like media narrative. Like they're gonna try to push that in the favor of like Caleb or Marvin Harrison,
right?
Just because of like the kind of weight around those two this year. But like sometimes it's undeniable, right? Like Bo Nix goes out there in that division of all divisions and wins, 9 games. Like you might not be able to stop it. It's kind of like, I don't know. Bo Nix is over here fucking balling. He's thrown,
right,
30 touchdowns, and he's only got 6 picks, and they're winning 9 games, and they're in the wild card fully. You know what I mean? Like that could very well be the situation. So I think that's something to consider. I'm not necessarily saying that's what's going to happen, but it wouldn't shock me if it did.
Yeah,
and that's kind of
he's going to play too. I don't. Yeah, that's
day
a good
one.
one.
Day one. He's better than Zach Wilson.
Do you see that meme do you see that meme of from Zoolander of Derek Zoolander and Hansel walking by each other? It's Zach Wilson and Bo Nix walks into the thing. And he's like,
fully. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really.
I'm you, but better.
I don't understand the Zach Wilson move. That's. I feel about the Zach Wilson move. I do too, but it's an odd move. I don't think it's real.
I agree.
No, it's an odd move.
That's a good pick, though. I think your projection on him is going to age a lot better than a lot of people are comfortable admitting.
I just feel like he's just getting written off. Like he was still like.
No, I totally agree.
He was taken top 15. Like he's not. You know what I mean? I never felt like watching. I feel like when I watched JJ. And I love JJ for everything he did, but I feel like when I watched JJ, I mean, you and I had talked about it. I was very much on record being like, I feel like he should probably stay another year. I think if you stay another year, you can really like show off and refine your talents because you don't have.
They got the right guy for them. Yeah, they got the right guy.
You know what I mean? So it's like to me, it's like I don't know. I think Bo Nix had a lot more in the bag than JJ McCarthy did, but. I don't know. That's just my take. That's just how I feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great one. It's kind of funny because what I love about stuff like this is somebody can say something that is the polar opposite of what your belief is, but you agree
Mm-hmm.
with what they're saying.
Yeah.
Because, like, for example, my favorite quarterback drafted was Jaden Daniels,
Sure.
and it's for an opposite reason.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree with you, right? It's a pick your
Mm-hmm.
poison type of game. I think for me, um, once you put a season on tape like that, we're now in the post you putting a season on tape like that era, right? And part of what's bothering me around this conversation is there's like this discrediting of last season because of some struggles at ASU. At times, he was still good. It's ASU with
Sure.
Herm Edwards as a head coach. But we saw what happened with Joe Burrow. When Joe Burrow had that season, it
Mm-hmm.
was raps, right? It's not like Joe
100%.
Burrow was lighting
Joe
it
Burrow
up at
was a Buckeye
OSU. He was on
before.
the
He didn't.
bench, right?
Yeah.
And
Hundred
it's sort
percent.
of like um, the reason why I like Jaden Daniels isn't so much the who, but it's the when. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's really suited for today's NFL.
I totally agree.
And the reason I say that is because you just touched on it. I do think that Cliff Kingsbury is absolutely the right OC right now to take care of this guy.
Yeah.
I think that Washington had a really like deep draft. They like really addressed a bunch. They brought in veterans in free agency. Do I think the Commanders are going to be world beaters next year? No. But you don't think the
No.
Broncos are going to be world beaters next year, right? Like
I sure don't.
we're
No.
talking about guys that we think might surprise next year, like just the guy that we like the most, based on where they went. I think it's the right OC for him. I don't know that Cliff's going to be there forever. He's a bit of a mercenary. He's kind of his own man. Like I think they might
Yeah.
have a couple years together, and someone else will
Yeah.
offer him a job or
Yes.
something like that'll happen. But if this hits, he's going to get, I think, some deserved credit for kind of
Yeah.
putting the electrifying film
Yeah.
out there, and I do believe it's
Yeah.
going to hit. The knock on him really with the size stuff, I don't give a shit. He's not short, and that's
Is
the
Lamar
issue with
Jackson
quarterback.
big?
Lamar Jackson has gotten bigger, but coming into the league, his skinny frame was part of the
But
knock.
that's
And I
what I
think
mean, though.
Jaden Daniels
Do we
will put
look at
on
him
some
and
muscle and
think
some size.
100% he will?
Yeah, and
100% he will.
he's 6'3" and a half, 6'4", so he's a taller quarterback. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a Tua issue or a Kyler issue where it's sort of like,
Yeah.
yeah, he can't or a Breeze or a Russ issue where it's sort of like, yeah, he's gonna have problems like seeing over the line sometimes, or he's
Sure.
got the length, he's got the arm length, he's got that. I just think his ability to throw the ball precisely combined with the explosive running ability is so suited for today's NFL with the offensive rules,
Mm-hmm.
with pushing the ball downfield, with explosive plays. They have good offensive pieces, not great, but good. Can you get another year out of Austin Eckler, right? Brian Robinson Jr., he's a good sort of David Montgomery type, churn and burn type of running back. He's nothing amazing, but he'll have a good season.
Yeah.
I still believe that Jahan Dotson kid out of Penn State they took a couple years ago, pretty good. And I think Terry McLaurin's due, man. I think Terry McLaurin is due. And they also took a tight end from Illinois, and I'm forgetting his name. It's like Ben Knotts or something like. I'm messing it up, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry in advance for that. But
It's all good.
I think they're putting pieces there that are really good, and I think Dan Quinn's going to have the defense playing pretty well, so they're going to have some opportunities for short fields, for big plays, and
Ben
I just
Sinnott.
dig it, man. Like Ben Sinnott, yeah.
Ooh, Ben Sinnott.
Ooh, Ben
Yeah.
Sinnott, yeah,
Ooh, Ben
yeah.
Sinnott.
It's Ben
They
Sinnott.
also
Yeah, it's
they
like,
signed
yeah.
Zach Ertz too.
They did sign Zach Ertz, and I think it's
Yeah.
the perfect sign
Yeah.
draft combination because what's
Yep.
going to happen is you're going to have Zach Ertz playing a little bit early. I mean, he's right at the end. I mean, he broke
Oh,
down last
for
year,
sure.
but him breaking down
Lions
last year opened up
Lions
the door
legend
for
Zach Ertz.
he's coming. Yeah, but it's like him breaking down last year opened up the door for Trey McBride in Arizona, right?
Yep.
And you're going to see
100%.
that this year. I think that Ben Sinnott kid, I watched a lot of his tape. He looks physical. He's a receiving tight end who can block. He's got the size. He's got the strength. So there's some weapons there. There's the right OC there. And look, man, it's going to be double or nothing. Like this is either going to be electric or it's going to crash and burn. And I'm a dice rolling kind of guy. Like I'm a bit of a riverboat gambler when it comes to my picks and like what I like. And I'm betting the over on these guys. Like I just think he's gonna come, and I think he'll struggle, but I think he's gonna have. You're gonna see like the electricity pretty early of like, oh, this guy can like really, really play. So that's my quarterback. That's the guy I'm gonna roll with, and I love your opinion on Knicks, and I actually share your opinion. I just
Yeah.
think I like my guy too, just for the opposite reason, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the
No,
anti-Bo Knicks.
I think it'll be. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because it's like, and I want to get into. I want to take some time and get into some kind of sleeper picks because I know we've discussed it before, and I want to
Yeah,
put it on tape.
yeah.
But you do see that like, and we've talked about it. Like all of these guys can't hit, and I think 2021 is a great example of like the people who hit.
It also just
There's
happened.
it just happened, but
Yeah.
it also like it's not linear, right? Like we've talked on like Mac Jones not being able to continue on what seemed like a very promising career after his rookie season. So you never actually know what it's going to be because situation matters so much. And
Mhm.
I think one of the players that you were going to touch on just now is potentially in the best situation for any backup in the NFL.
Mm. Yeah, sleepers.
If you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's really it's fun to talk like who's, the top quarterbacks.
Mhm.
Um Somebody that I think nobody's talking about is Jordan Travis from
I
Florida
totally
State.
agree.
Yeah, it's just and again, I didn't watch all of Florida State, but I did watch them a little bit. And all of this stuff is relevant to me. Everything that happens along the way is relevant. And if you remember, people, the big hullabaloo, if you will, the big outrage last year, college football playoff selection time was,
Yeah,
number one, like our boys in the cheating stuff, like we should
of
be out because we
course.
cheated.
Love it.
Number two
No, we
was like
shouldn't, by the way.
the Georgia should be in. That was another big kind of debate. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't take it away from us,
No,
baby.
you can't. I
But
saw
that
with my
being
own two
said,
eyes.
yeah, but remember the big one, and rightfully so, was the sort of the Florida State outrage of like,
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
absolute, what's that Isaiah Thomas meme where he's like, I fit the criteria to be selected.
Oh,
I just
100%.
wasn't.
It
It's like, but the reason why
was because
the
Jordan
committee
Travis got
didn't,
hurt. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
it's sort of like, okay, so this team went from being a national championship contender, and what do they might they have gotten smacked in the playoffs? Probably. I mean, I think the
Probably,
other
but
four teams that were in it were better.
yeah.
But that being said, Isaiah Thomas, they fit the criteria. Like
They absolutely fit
they
the criteria.
yeah, and the
They
main reason why they fit the
probably should have been
criteria
in. They probably should have been
totally.
because they still
Yeah.
won the
And
ACC without Jordan Travis. You know what I mean?
but everybody in the committee was like, there's no way that we can put
Yeah.
this good
No, that was
team
probably the
that
right
maybe
call.
deserves to be there without this guy. And the reason, and the difference was this quarterback. He's a playmaker. He's mobile. I mean, he's not, Jaden Daniels, but he's mobile. He's got a good arm, and he's a
Yeah.
leader. And he put a really good season on film last year, and unfortunately, he just didn't get a chance to finish it. But he goes to the Jets, and I just don't know how much longer the Aaron Rodgers experiment is going to last. I
Hmm.
really am hoping and praying that for the sake of the fans and for the sake of just football fans in general, we can get a healthy Aaron season.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a bit like the Penix situation, just done a little more formulaic, right? Where it's like we're going to wait on this guy. There's a little bit of Jordan Love to his game. There's a little bit of those things where, and I think
So
that
it's high
after a year
upside,
or
man.
two of playing behind Rodgers, I think he could be a really good player if the Jets
Yeah.
don't have a pivot, and I like what they did in the draft outside of him. So he's going to be coming into some pieces, right? Like
Totally agree
we'll
there.
touch on some of those guys later. There's a couple guys I want to get to on the Jets, but I like that. I like that landing spot. It's
I
just
love that.
sneaky.
I
It's
love
it's
that
it's
landing spot.
quiet.
I
He's
mean, I
going to
love
be a
it.
backup. It's like the anti Zach Wilson pick. It's
A
sort of like he's
100%.
not going to have to play. There's no pressure. He's a late pick. He's a backup, but it's like
Yeah.
I don't know. This kid can play now. Like he might have a chance to get in there in a couple years.
Yeah. I
We'll see.
completely agree. I completely agree.
Eh,
Once I saw
Yeah,
that, I
and
was like, oh, that's
you didn't really
sneaky
think of it.
good. That's sneaky good.
Yeah, you didn't really think of it. You're like, I
Well,
forgot about this
because he
guy.
got
And
completely written off when he got injured. So it was like, okay, well, bummer. Like they
right,
lost all their juice.
yeah,
And I mean, he
but
dropped to what, like the
yeah,
sixth? You know what I mean? Like,
hmm
had he
yeah,
stayed healthy. So, like, okay, but like, if you stay healthy and you go to, you go to the playoff and you win a playoff game, are you considered a first round pick?
potentially, or a
You know what I
second
mean?
round. I think that yeah, I think that teams got a little scared off, and I don't
Yeah.
think he's as good as like Penix was,
No,
or
no,
like
no, no.
as
I don't either.
electric as JD5, or as consistent as Bona. He's clearly a tier behind him. But
But those
he's
guys
an
always drop to the
interesting
best
thing.
situations. That's the thing. Those guys,
Totally, and
you know
he
what I mean?
dropped
It's
to a
it's
good situation, in my
yeah.
opinion. He did. Yeah, and I think I know who you're going to say, but I'm curious to maybe who your quarterback sleeper was of this draft.
So my quarterback sleeper is interesting because I don't actually believe in this guy, but I'm very, very, very interested to see what the deal is.
The disclaimer.
It's true. It's just true, dude. And it's like because okay.
It's like Kenny Powers.
No, it is. It's because my
I just
thing
picture like
is
Kenny Powers walking out.
my right, right.
Let's go play some
Bam,
baseball. Or
bam,
what?
bam, bam, bam. No,
The
my
front office is just like, I don't actually believe in this guy, but man,
no,
he can throw a baseball.
he can. And frankly, Spencer Rattler can throw a football. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
hell yeah. Hell
I think the landing spot is interesting because Derek Carr stinks. Derek
Yeah.
Carr is so not the
Sucks
guy,
to suck.
right? And I feel like Derek Carr always misses like a game or like a half at the very least. You know, like didn't he leave the game during that Detroit game last year for like
Yeah,
a
Jameis
quarter
Jameis
basically
always
or
got a
something?
couple snaps
Jameis
last year.
Jameis got a little tick last year, and they moved off Jameis, which I thought was super interesting. And they brought in Spencer
I don't know
Rattler during
why.
the draft, and
Yep.
yeah, but that's what I mean, right? It's like Jameis is solid as can be as far as a backup, right? Like he's probably the
Yeah.
best backup you can have in the league. You know, him, Gardner Minshew. It's a very short list. Probably Michael Penix now, but if Jameis has to come in for 2 to 3 weeks, you feel pretty good about yourself. You're like, okay, this is a guy who,
Andy Dalton.
yeah, 100%. You know, like
Yeah.
a very
Yeah,
like
yeah.
and so for somebody as dynamic as Spencer Rattler, who was supposed to, 3-4 years ago, it was like, okay, this guy's like future #1 draft pick. He's going to
Mhm.
Oklahoma to play under Riley, what's his name? Lincoln Riley. And
Oh, Lincoln Riley.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then he just got his spot like fully ran by Caleb Williams, and he was stinky. And he left, and then
Yeah,
he
he
went
was a
to
huge letdown,
he went to
unfortunately.
what was it, South Carolina, the Gamecocks, right? Isn't that where he went?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
he
Yeah.
he kind of balled last year. Like
He did.
I don't know if he was just an Xavier Legette merchant and Legette's just that good, or if Legette was a bit of a
Other way around, kind of. It's a
you
symbiotic
know what I mean?
relationship
No, it
because Leggett
is.
didn't have a good year before either, and I
Yeah,
think it was the combination of both. I
I
think
agree.
Leggett showed who he was, and then Rattler
Yeah,
really came into his own last year. It was
yeah.
interesting to watch.
And they
It
have,
did. You're totally
they
right.
have like, I don't think they have like elite weapons, but they have weapons. You know what I mean? They have Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, they got what's left of him.
They have Chris Olave.
Yeah.
It's not nothing, I should say. It's not mainly Chris Olave. Chris Olave is
No.
young. He just was, I'll never touch him again fantasy wise, but
Rashid
somebody will.
Shaheed's all right. It's a pretty explosive, like field stretcher, Gabe Davis
Yeah.
type. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's super interesting, and he's going to be a fun guy to keep an eye on
Yeah.
if he gets a chance. It's going to be fun. It is going to be a little Kenny Powersy, right?
Oh,
Where it's
100%.
Like he's kind of like
he's
gonna be that kind of thing.
people
of like,
really like
the fans will be calling
what
for him
I
if Derek stinks it up. I'll tell you that much.
what I love about Spencer Rattler is that people fucking hate him. They don't like him from all the way back from the QB show because he's a dickhead,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, but I think he had some humbling and some maturity, the last couple of years, and so I think that'll be an interesting thing
Yeah.
to watch. So Spencer Rattler, QB1, Netflix.
Love it. Love it, baby.
I do want to talk about, what the NFL's in an interesting time where I feel like, partially it's like fantasy football, Madden, this kind of culture in general, but it's the offensive rules, and the wide receiver position is almost being, I don't want to say, I think as a wide receiver aficionado myself, I almost feel like blasphemous saying this, but I think it went from being undervalued to just a touch overvalued now.
Agreed.
And I'm curious, do you know what I mean by that?
I
Like
do.
it's almost
Yeah,
like
I
an
do.
overcorrection where it was like it was undervalued for years, and it's like it's really important that you have playmakers, and now it's getting to the point where it's like okay, we can't pay these guys like quarterbacks. Like that's a little ridiculous. But I want to, but beyond that point, I do think that this was the kind of wide receiver draft in terms of depth,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you will. So kind of like we talked about quarterbacks, I'm curious as to who's your receiver in this draft and why. And give me a couple sleepers. Give me a couple guys that you're like, these guys could be stars, but they're not sort of the obvious.
Yeah. No. Well, speaking of obvious, I am very high on Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's gonna be
Same.
so dynamic. And I think that not so much because he does have like all the physical attributes. He feels like LeBron coming into the NFL, right? It's just like you have
Mm-hmm.
everything. But he also has a dad who's a very like level-headed guy who was never very diva-ish and um seems to have gotten him very prepared for the NFL. Like I think and
Sure.
I know people are like and I'm gonna kind of take the opposite stance of what I'm seeing online right now. Like he hasn't signed his NFL PA contract agreement, right? And I was reading into this.
Daddy put him on
I
game.
was reading into this a little bit because everybody was pissed off
Yep.
about it, and I'm like, well, okay, well, what's the benefit of not signing it, right? Like, so let me look into this and see what the deal is basically. And what I
Mm-hmm.
read and what I learned was that the NFL, once you sign that agreement, they can sell off your jerseys, right? Like they take that agreement and they say, okay, here, Fanatics, start pumping out the Cardinals jerseys, and we're gonna pay, the NFLPA a lump sum, and then
Mm-hmm.
he'll get a piece of that lump sum. So what
Right.
Marvin's doing is like, nah, if you want my name and likeness, you're gonna come pay me, and you're gonna make me a deal. I'm not gonna pay the lumps. I'm not gonna get a
Mm.
percentage of the lump sum. You're gonna pay me directly if you're gonna be selling my jerseys and making millions off my jerseys. I'm getting a fucking cut of that shit. And frankly,
Show me the money.
I feel him. I feel him, man. I mean, this is your life, bro. Like there's no
It's a new world.
there's no need to um kind of kowtow to like like and it's kind of like it's whack in the sense of like, does this affect your ability to be in Madden? Like, are you just gonna be like player 18, and everybody's gonna know that it's you, but like Madden's not gonna cut you a deal? Like that could be a little annoying because it's like, ah, man, I want to play with him in like the video game. But if it's like
Sure.
if
Screw Madden.
I mean, totally screw Madden. That's how I feel. But
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
feel like there's. I'm not talking for myself. I'm talking for the myself at 12 years old who loved Madden and who's a
Totally understand what you're saying. Yeah.
diehard Arizona Cardinals
Yeah.
fan who cannot wait to buy the new Madden so he can play with his favorite player. That's who I'm more thinking
Yep.
about. And I think that in that regard, it is a bit lame if you never reach that agreement. But hey, if Madden's smart, they'll come to you and they'll make you an offer. Um, Not holding my breath on that because Madden and smart typically don't go in the same sentence as we just discussed. But
Right.
as far as like Fanatics goes and these big companies who are pumping out these dog shit jerseys for $130, I mean, absolutely all day, baby. Come, you want my likeness? Come get it. Come buy me. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I think people were pretty mad at him for not doing like the combine and shit, but I don't know. I kind of feel him. It's like, what do I need to prove myself for? What if I fuck around and get hurt? What if I?
Yeah.
He's very much protecting the bag, and I'm just not mad at that. I'm just not mad at that.
Right.
Especially when you have a dad who's been through the process, who knows what to do, who knows all the ins and outs of the league. You getting this advice in your ear, being like, you don't really have to do that. That shit doesn't matter, bro. You're already projected.
Right.
You're already projected top 3. Everybody knows you're wide receiver 1. Everybody's known that you were wide receiver 1 last year.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, what does it matter what your 40 time is? You're gonna go out there and ball. Arizona's taking
Right.
you. You're the furthest you're gonna drop is 6, maybe. You know what I mean? Like Giants
Yeah.
would have taken him.
Yeah.
Chargers would have taken him probably.
Yeah.
I don't
agree.
know, man. I think his mentality for as lame as it is when these nobodies go online and they're like, "Ma, he should sign the NFLPA. What a piece of shit." It's like, I don't know, bro. This is his life. This is this man's life. If he's protecting his
Yeah.
assets, that makes him a very smart 20-year-old kid, in my opinion. And I salute him. I
Right.
think the mentality is in the right spot. Whether you like it or not, I think it's in the right
Yeah.
spot.
I agree with you, and I think it can be a little bit. It can be a little bit discouraging sometimes when you look at a situation and you think to yourself, you know, what would I do in this situation? And you and I are civilians, and we would just want the bag, right? But like
100%.
he's thinking a step ahead, and his dad, being a former player, is probably putting him on game, and the agents that his dad has probably set him up with,
Yeah.
are putting him on game, right?
Yeah.
So he's already a step ahead of this. But I agree with you about Marv. It seems like it's a lazy take to say that he's your favorite receiver in this draft, but some things just are. You know,
100%.
LeBron
He's
was
just
the
my
guy,
favorite.
not Wade, not Melo,
Yeah.
but those guys are dogs too,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I also
And
think I'd go as far, just to allude on that real quick. Like, I think I'd go as far to say
yeah,
he's my favorite player in this draft. You know what I mean? It's not even that he's my favorite receiver.
same,
I think he's my favorite
same.
player.
Yeah, we've talked
And
about this. Yeah, he's mine too.
yeah.
And I think yeah, I think a big obvious part of that is the talent.
Mm-hmm.
I do think he's in a different bracket in terms of like well-roundedness
Yeah,
as
I
a
totally agree.
receiving talent and a receiving prospect. I do think that we're going to be discussing him with the Tyreeks and the Justin
Very
Jeffersons
quickly.
and the CDs probably before this season ends, but essentially 100% going into next season. And that's just my prediction. But I think what's interesting too is, you know, with everything, landing spot is so important. And, you know, the other receivers that we were sort of discussing in his bracket, right? In his tier, which I think is kind of untrue to begin with, but
Yeah.
I'm just playing devil's
Sure.
advocate. Were Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
I don't like where Rome Odunze went.
Mm-mm.
You've alluded to it. I've alluded to it. I don't like that coaching staff. I
No.
don't like Shane Waldron. I don't like Matt Eberflus. I don't really believe in Caleb. That's a whole different conversation. But all those things are true for me. And I do believe that Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and having Gerald Everett there as an addition and having a pass-catching running back as a free agent addition and having Cole Kmet there as a tight end, I think there's one football, and I think
Totally agree.
Odunze is going to struggle to take over next year because I don't believe like I do with Marv in terms of well-roundedness
Mhm.
and overall talent, and Neighbors in terms of excitement and explosiveness. I don't believe that Odunze really has either of those things. I
Yeah.
think he's much more of a two and a Larry Fitzgerald and a Mushin Mohammed and that kind of receiver.
Mhm.
I think he's really going to struggle to get the amount of looks that it takes to like really be a star next
Yeah.
season. Now we'll talk in the future after next year.
Yeah.
And then Malik Neighbors, I just don't like the Giants. I think they had a good draft. I think Dayball's a good coach. They lost their best offensive player.
Yeah.
I don't like their quarterback situation. I don't feel like that's where Neighbors wanted to go. There's been a lot of discussion about that, and I know nobody really wants to like listen to these guys, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like a diva thing where it's like, oh, who does he think he is? He got
Mhm.
drafted. He's getting paid millions of dollars. I'm like, it's a new world, dude. These top 10 guys, they want to have a little say into where they're playing their
No,
even
I
their
mean,
rookie
yeah,
contracts.
you just
now.
watched
You know what
Marvin
I'm saying? I
Harrison
don't think that's where he
well, you
wanted
just
to be.
watched Marvin Harrison get gifted Kyler Murray.
That's my
And
point. And I think that
the whole time you have
right.
to be thinking mentally, I'm about to get Justin Herbert. There's no way they're
Yeah.
passing on me. I'm the next best wide receiver, and their
Yep.
wide receiver one currently is Quentin fucking Johnson. I know he's the greatest.
I knew Jim was going to do that.
He's the greatest of all time.
knew
We
Jim
know
was gonna
that,
do
but
that.
that's besides
Yeah.
the point. You know,
Yeah.
I can go.
I knew Jim was going to do that.
Of course, we both did because
Yeah.
we know how
Yeah.
Jim operates. But it's like I don't think Neighbors knew that. You know what I mean? Because you look at it objectively, and you saw. I mean, dude, the mocks were the mocks for so long, right? Like Neighbors was very consistently mocked to the Chargers at 5. It was
And
not.
he was in Cali. He was down over in
Yeah, dude.
down out here on looking at beachfront property and shopping for homes. And yeah, I think he thought he was going to be a Charger. I didn't,
That's
but I'm
rough,
sure he did.
man. I forgot about
But
that.
you know,
I forgot about that.
yeah, he was.
Yeah.
But that's you know, you addressed a really interesting thing that's not being discussed, and you know, I'm addressing something a little more obvious, but I do think it can't be, you know, it cannot be overstated how important landing spot is for young receivers. And I just like having a franchise quarterback in place, one who I believe in, unlike a lot of y'all. And I think that Arizona is going in the right direction. I don't think they're here, but I think they're going in the right direction. And I don't know that I feel that way about the Giants. And then with Odunze, it's just a depth chart issue. It just feels very Jackson Smith and Jigba in Seattle last year,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just like, yeah, you're good, but like, are we gonna see you featured a bunch? Like, I don't know. It feels like Keenan Allen's like last stop is here. It feels like DJ Moore's time is now. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like these free agent additions are all offense,
Yeah.
and we'll see, right? Um, but yeah, I like it, and I think those are the obvious ones. I wanted to ask you if there's a wide receiver that's not sort of the big three, right? Shout out to Kendrick. It really is just Big Me, but you know the
100%.
fictitious Big Three,
Yeah.
if you will. But is there a non-Big Three guy that you're looking at this year as sort of like everybody's like, you know what I mean? Like they don't know what's coming. This guy's gonna eat on like a star level potentially.
Yeah, not to sack ride this team too much because I feel like I'm coming back around on them, but I love the Troy Franklin pick by the Broncos because
So
Troy
interesting.
Franklin
Yeah, he fell off.
he was like a projected like top probably late first round, early second round guy, and he fell to like the 7th or the 6th. He went really late. I don't know exactly
Right.
where he got drafted, but I know it was in the later rounds, and I felt like that was really crazy for a guy who was projected so high all season. And I wouldn't like Troy Franklin if he didn't end up in Denver because you're going with
Mm,
your quarterback who you absolutely lit it up with last year, and you already have
yeah.
that chemistry built in. So
Yeah. Love it.
it's not like, hey, bro,
I'm with you.
we're just meeting right now for the first time. Let's go practice. It's oh, we're like we've been doing this for a minute. Like we're actually like homeboys. Like let's go like get an apartment together and like let's live together for the next year and a half because we're like best friends. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I feel like Bo Nix probably had a say in that pick. Like probably saw that he was like
Yeah.
sliding and was like, "Hey, coach, like I don't know." Like he's very very much with CJ Stroud and Tank Dell last year of like, "Hey, go get my boy." Um,
Yeah.
I think that's one of those situations where he's like, "All right, bro's falling. Like, go get him, please. If you want to help me
Yeah.
out, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?" Excuse me.
Yeah. And it's interesting you point that out because the other component to this is Denver is like a new company almost like looking for good employees.
Yep.
It's like they don't have, I mean, they have Cortland Sutton, but he's holding out allegedly. And I'm
Yeah.
not so sure he's coming back.
No, he'd be a
Um,
good trade piece for them. Like he'd be better suited somewhere
yeah.
else. He's a
Yeah. But I'm
very good
saying,
very
um,
good sneaky wide receiver, but he's not a one.
I agree. And they took that guy Mims last year,
Yep.
but he's an undersized speed merchant,
Yep.
which I just
And
don't.
made
And
of
they traded
glass.
Jerry Judy.
Yeah.
Yes, they traded Jerry Judy
Yeah.
to Cleveland, who gave him a little more money than that's a whole different
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
But they are looking for guys now to kind of fill that
100%.
lineup and like make plays. And I do think, I mean, he fell farther than he was supposed to, according to all of
Yeah,
us
I'm sorry.
morons who didn't quite put it together. Um, so that's a really interesting one. And I do think that it's another situation, like you said, of situation kind of lining up for him to be a sleeper player. I'm going to kind of cop out on my sleeper. I do have a lot of sleepers that I
Okay.
like, but I want
Fourth
to
round.
kind of
Fourth
go.
round.
Yeah,
That's
fourth round is
crazy
crazy.
though.
I have some later picks that I really like. Javon Baker is a big one to
Mm-hmm.
me, and I could talk about him. But I want to talk about a guy who I think has a chance to be kind of a star, who's not being discussed enough, in my opinion, and that's Brian Thomas Jr. out
Sure.
of LSU. Um, Again, here we are, right? Like back in the same
Classic.
circle of like talking about landing spot, right? I like Doug Peterson as a coach. I like the addition of Gabe Davis because Gabe Davis is a non-issue. Gabe Davis is a field stretching, boomer bust, deep threat wide receiver who's essentially going to replace what they did with Ridley last year, which was
Fully.
nothing. Have him run
Yeah.
fly routes and clear out. I like Christian Kirk a lot, but he's a slot guy. He's an
Yep.
underneath guy, and he has a tendency of getting banged up now.
Yeah.
We've seen like year after year, Christian Kirk can miss games.
Yes, he can.
Their tight end, Evan Ingram, is really good, but he's a tight end. He's a red zone threat.
Yep.
That's kind of it. I don't love their O-line, but I love their coach and quarterback enough. And I shouldn't say love. I like them enough that I think they can support a wide receiver one right now. And to me, Brian Thomas Jr. he's just that guy. Like, if you watch his tape at LSU, he's explosive. He has hands. He makes plays on the ball. He can run underneath and make men miss. Pause. Underneath, yards after catch.
Yeah.
He has wiggle to his routes. He's a huge deep ball threat, right? So you have that now with Trevor. And I just think that next year Jacksonville is going to come out with something to prove. I don't know that they're going to be world beaters, but I think that we're going to be looking at him next year kind of mid-season, late season, and being like, oh, that's right. Like, this guy was just about as good as Neighbors. And if Neighbors wasn't on LSU last year, I think Brian Thomas Jr. would be discussed even more if he had played at, like, I don't know, Georgia or something. You know, I mean, they had McConkey, but you know what I mean? Like a school without like another stud who ended up being like basically a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
He's really good. And I don't see a huge difference between him and Neighbors when I watched them play last year. And I watched a lot of LSU. And I like Jacksonville a lot more as a landing spot right now than I like New York.
Yeah.
So I think that's my sleeper. And he's not really a sleeper. It's a bit of a cop-out, but I do think.
Yeah, but he's not really being talked about in those top
like
3.
Being a star.
Yeah.
He's not being talked about as a potential star.
Yeah.
And that's how I view him. I think he has a chance to be a star if it works in Jacksonville. Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I'm gonna get negative because I just feel like it's disingenuous for me to just talk positively about everybody.
Let's get into the nitty gritty, baby. This is our bread and butter.
Yeah, we have a kind of a tendency to do the thing of like looking at all of these picks and going, that's a star. Wow, they hit. And most of these guys aren't going to hit. So what are a couple early picks that you're looking at? And just give me a couple off the rip, off top if you can, of guys that you're just kind of not feeling that other people are either excited about or gassing up, and you just don't have the same view.
I very much dislike Odunze. And I don't.
It's not just because he's a bear.
It's not just because he's a bear.
Promise?
I promise. It doesn't help that he's a bear. It doesn't help.
No,
if he wasn't, and I'll say this. This is just me being totally honest. If he wasn't a bear, I don't do the research that I did on him because, granted, I'm gonna play him twice. He's gonna be in my division.
Money in the streets, like
yeah, fully. I put money in the street. I put instead of 100,000, I put 100 pennies, and I said, all right, let's go. I need intel. But no, I just keep seeing like, oh, he's so good. He's gonna be so good. He's gonna be so good, and I'm like,
yeah,
okay. And you know, it touches on everything that you've just touched on, right? It's like, it's situation. Like I don't love the situation. You're going in there as wide receiver 3. So how many touches are you really gonna get? You know, how many catches are you? Can Caleb really spread that ball around without it being an issue? You know, and maybe the answer is yes, but having to share your rookie year with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, like you said, I think Keenan Allen's like, he's about done. Like the car's warming up currently. I think DJ Moore's time is absolutely now. I think he's entering that 2 to 3 year window where he's going to be, you know, a borderline top 10 guy, if not like a certified top 10 guy, depending on how good Caleb is. So I feel like that leaves Odunze a little bit in the dust, unless he can stand out above those two, which is what my fear was, right? It's like, oh God, like, man, if Odunze is like as good as they're saying he is, like, this offense might really be it. So what I did was I went and I watched Washington against Oregon last year. And you know, Christian Gonzalez was a very highly regarded cornerback. He looked pretty good in his first couple of games, but then he got injured. So we didn't really see like what he was for real. You know, like
he did look good before the
really
injury,
good.
though,
He looked really good,
yes.
But he also had the best defensive mind as his head coach. So like, you're coming off of injury and you don't have Bill Belichick anymore. So that might get lost in the sauce, right? That might be like,
Hmm.
oh, he looked so good, but he was a Bill Belichick merchant. It's like, yeah, maybe. I don't really know. It's hard to say. We didn't get a whole season of
Sure.
him. We don't know what it is. He
Sure.
had that man
Yep.
in Alcatraz, bro. He had that man
Hmm.
locked the fuck in. Like it was crazy.
So
He had
interesting.
him and
Yeah.
and then I'm like, and so then my mind goes, all right, well, again, Christian Gonzalez is, we think, a high-end NFL cornerback. So I mean, he's gonna have a lot
Yeah.
of people locked down, especially and it's Rome Odunze last year. It's not him this year. So, maybe he grew up a little bit. He got a little better here, a little better there, whatever. So then I go and I watch every rep that happened in the Michigan game because that's the only Rome Odunze game that I watched last year, like start to finish, right? Like, frankly,
Okay. I watched a
I'm
couple.
not
Yeah.
watching Michigan State go out there and pull their pants down for fucking Washington. So the only game I watched
They
was
did.
100% they did. So I'm not doing that personally. So I
Yeah.
so I went back and I
No, I got you.
watched shout out bro on YouTube. I can't remember I subscribed though, but he chopped up every single Odunze target this year. It was like a 25-minute video. And
Mm.
you're watching these videos. I'm watching this whole video and I'm like, damn, like he does look good. He looks really good. And he looked really good against some teams that were absolute fucking dog shit on defense. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
some teams that
Yep.
like just are not ever known for defense. I think USC most notably, Michigan State just mentioned like he had a great game against them. He had a great game against USC. He had a great game against there was somebody else that he had a great game against that it was like none of these teams are like defensive powerhouses. Like these are all the teams that we always joke
Mm-mm.
about and we're like this is why Caleb Williams is like throwing fucking 16 touchdowns a game because he's like they're playing these defenses that are just like an absolute joke. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
and he didn't like
And they were powerhouse
their
offense too.
powerhouse
Powerhouse offense.
offense.
Great
And I
quarterback, and they were
go
3 deep at
three
receiver.
deep, bro. There was
Yeah.
twice. There was
It's
there
important.
was twice that he got open against Michigan, and both times was because of blown safety plays. And one of them, Michael Penix overthrew very notably. It was like a big moment in the game, and Odunze kind of like jumped for it, missed it. It was kind of like one of those moments where it's like, oh, this game's over.
Yeah.
There was another one where
Yeah.
he had a big reception, but at the same time, Will Johnson pushes him off onto the safety. The safety's absolutely not in the right position, and Roman Dunze is completely wide open. Everything else was
Sure.
very like it was a lot of like hook routes. It was a lot of like kind of darts up the middle, but it was nothing that was standing out to me.
Mm.
And every time that he lined up one-on-one against Will Johnson had that man in hell. And
Yeah.
again, Will Johnson is probably going to be a top 10 draft pick next year, barring, any injury or anything like that. He's very good
But that's what
cornerback.
you're gonna be playing as a
But
one receiver. As a number 1
that's
receiver, that's what
exactly
you're
my point.
seeing.
And I think that his burst,
Yeah.
I
And
think
don't give me coaching either with the Michigan game because that
I'm with you.
that was a situation of great defensive coaching. I mean, our defensive
Jesse Minter
coaches for U
is
of M in the
literally the
national
Chargers
championship.
DC now. You know what I mean? Like,
But that's my point. Like you're going to be going up against great
yep,
schemes. You're going to be going up against great corners. What makes you a star
yeah,
is your
I
ability
totally
to
agree.
take over a game despite that.
And his
And the real ones in the league can do that.
he's the
CD can do
and the
that.
thing
Jefferson can do
totally
that.
agree, totally agree. And I
Yeah.
think the thing he's gonna struggle with the most in the NFL is his explosion off of the line of scrimmage is not there. It's just not there.
Right.
And he
Right.
he is a hell of a ball hawk, and he's got great hands. So if he can get
Yes, he
open,
does.
I mean, hell, the sky's the limit. The problem is I don't see him creating any type of separation or getting off the line of scrimmage quickly. And you're not going to do
Mhm.
that against, you're not going to do that against Jair Alexander. You're not going to do that against, hopefully, fingers crossed, Terrion Arnold. But you're definitely not going to do it against Carlton Davis. You're not going to do it against, I don't even know who the Vikings have in their cornerback room. I'm sure they have somebody good, but you're going to see those guys.
Kind of weak right now at
It's a
corner.
little lackluster. But
Yeah.
you're going to
A
see
little sus for you
you're
guys.
going to see those
Yeah.
guys twice a year, no matter what. And then, on top
Right.
of your other schedule, I mean, you got to see San Francisco, you got to see Dallas, you got to see, Seattle, you got to see these teams, and
Yeah.
and I just I don't know. I don't hope I'm wrong because fuck the Bears, but for the kids'
Yeah.
sake, I mean, he seems
I
like
would love for you to be right.
he
I
seems
would
like a
love for
good
you to be
kid
right.
though. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I watch his
He does.
interviews and
He
I'm
does.
like, I kind of want to root for this guy. Like I hate that he went to the Bears. I really wish like the Falcons would have taken him or like he would have dropped to the Jets would have been awesome. I would be like his biggest fan. But I again, and it comes back to what I said at the beginning about these quarterbacks. Not everybody can hit, man. Not everybody can hit.
Yeah.
I mean, we never
Yeah.
look at a draft and say, oh, everybody hit. You know what I mean? I mean,
No, I totally agree with you.
2022, we look at, you know, I think objectively speaking, Garrett Wilson hit, but like Chris Olave is like, he's left a lot to be desired. He's pretty good. He's like a high end 2, but you drafted him to be a 1.
Situation.
Jamison Williams has been an absolute disappointment so far, and that's coming from a diehard Lion, like he's just has been.
Drake London situation.
Jake, 100%. He's, you know, so
yeah.
And the hit rate on wide receivers is higher, but again, it can't be 100%. It never is. We never see it be 100%. So you tell me who's more likely to fail? Is it going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, or Rome Odunze? You tell me, because I'm taking the first 2.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's so funny that it ended up being a first-round wide receiver again for you, because my version of this are also first-round wide receivers.
Always is.
I have 2 guys. I'm gonna pair them almost to give contrasting reasons as to why these guys are, and I'm not gonna dissect them.
Sure.
I think it's more interesting to dissect Odunze because he's being talked about as a star.
Yeah.
These guys aren't quite being talked about at star level, but they're first-round receivers. So it's interesting. My 2 guys are Xavier Worthy in Kansas City and Ricky Parasol in San Francisco. And it's opposite reasons that I don't like the pick. So with Xavier Worthy, I just don't like his game on an NFL level. I think he's small. I don't think he catches contested passes well at all. I watched a lot of Texas. I've already shouted out Austin a bunch because it was so much fun going down there. But I did go see them play last year. I think he was absolutely the 2 behind Adonai Mitchell last year, 100%. He looks like a speed merchant to me. It's giving Darius Hayward-Bay. It's giving John Ross. It's giving that type of.
Yes, it is.
It just is. Yeah. And this isn't me talking trash. His highlights are dope. I'm not knocking the guy he's not talented. And if it's going to work, it's going to work in Kansas City. For me, I look at even the landing spot and I view his game as a similar issue that Kansas City had last year. They had speed. What they didn't have enough of was sure-handed, complete wide receivers.
Yeah. Boy, we're nitpicking, aren't we?
You said,
boy, we're nitpicking, aren't we? What the Chiefs didn't have. They got a Super Bowl ring.
But hey, listen, man, the Chiefs are amazing, but I will say, you're trying in the offseason, you're trying to.
Yeah.
Listen.
Yeah.
I'm never going to shade
and boys
the Chiefs,
back to
but
back.
They had a difficult regular season.
Yeah, no, they did.
And a main reason they did was because they had perimeter speed. They had Tony. They had Valdez-Scantling. They had these guys who can make plays, but they weren't. It's almost like pouring more salt on the wound, I think, of what their issue was at wide receiver. Now, I love Hollywood Brown. We'll see if Rashee Rice can, hopefully his lawyer doesn't show up in baggy pants and he can figure it out. He's got a good lawyer, right? But my other guy, to wrap it up on Worthy, I don't love his game at an NFL level as a complete wide receiver, and it's just not close to me on some of these other guys.
Yeah.
I just see speed. That's it.
Yeah.
And
doesn't it feel before you move off that real fast? Doesn't it feel like they're trying to replace Kadarius Toney with Kadarius Toney?
Yes,
you know
that's
what I mean.
It's MVS. It's who was that guy they had before? Mecole Hardman. It's got a lot of that.
Yeah.
It's I wanted you guys to get a real one receiver.
It's like Andy Reid can't.
Not that.
It's like Andy Reid can't help himself. He's just like, fuck yeah, dude. These little fast guys are just so it. It's like, dude, you had Tyreek Hill. You got rid of him.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? If you're gonna try to replace him every year,
Yeah, and no, it's so true. And I would say my other guy is sort of the opposite, and it would be Ricky Parasol.
Sure.
I really like Ricky Parasol's game, and he was kind of going into the draft, one of the players that I was really interested in seeing.
Sure.
Where he went. Because everyone talked about Ladd McConkey.
Yeah.
It's a white wide receiver.
Sure.
He's so good. And I was like, I mean, you know me, I was doing receiver evaluations, and I was kind of Parasol looks like more of an NFL player than McConkey does. He's got a real style and a
Yeah.
juice and a touch to his game that like
Yes.
I don't see as much with McConkey. But I don't understand why San Francisco drafted him.
It makes no
Like
sense. Not
he's
now.
gonna be
It made sense if we
yeah,
saw
he's
the
gonna
day
be
two Brandon Ayuk or
the trade.
Debo Samuel trade. Now it just seems like
But but
he's got the same problem
yeah.
Odunze has, right? Like, is it not the
But
same?
yeah, but it's worse actually because John Lynch just came out and said we're not planning on trading Ayuk or Debo. So now you have your one receiver, Debo or Ayuk, right? You have those two guys as your 1-2.
Mm-hmm.
You still have Jawan Jennings on the roster, who a lot of people consider to be a very, very good 3. He's very underrated. You still have Ronnie Bell, who showed flashes last year, and you still have George Kittle and Christian
That's
McCaffrey.
a
So
lot of mouths to
where
feed,
does this
man.
guy fit on
Yeah.
this offense? Like I
Yeah, I don't
don't
know.
understand. I just would have liked to see him go to a team that maybe has the ability for him to be a 2 or at least a 3.
Yeah.
I don't. He's gonna have to be a superstar in camp to even see the field next year, let alone get targets. Like he might
Yeah.
not play.
No, that's
I
real.
mean, seriously,
Yeah,
he's gonna be ahead of Ronnie Bell. Are you sure?
Yeah,
Is he gonna be ahead of Juwan Jennings?
John Lynch is
No.
interesting because he really like nails it in like rounds like 2 through 7, but it seems like round 1 is always his biggest struggle. And
Does he nail it, or does Adam Peters nail it? And Adam Peters is in
we
Washington
will
now.
find out, won't we? We will
Yes, we
definitely
will.
find
Tune in
out.
next
Yeah,
week.
that's facts. No, that's facts.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, we no, I think that's a really interesting that's a really really interesting point on on sort of like guys that we think are good players but maybe
Yeah.
we don't love like their games or like where they went.
Yeah.
Um you were talking to me the other day about something that I was hoping that you would be able to like verbalize with like next year's mocks in terms of
Yeah.
positional picks like where we essentially we already have mocks coming out like just kill me, right?
Yeah.
We already have
The
mocks
way
coming
too
out for next
early
year.
James
Yeah.
Pierce edge from
But
Tennessee
yeah.
drafted number
It's like
1.
what?
Oh, what?
Yeah. But you said something really interesting to me that I thought was worth discussing on here. You're noticing a theme with these mocks, right?
I'm noticing a big theme, and it's the
You want to talk
I
about it?
do, yeah.
I'm curious.
It's the every time it's the Carolina Panthers number 1, and not
Right.
and to be fair, not every time is it them moving off of Bryce, but it's typically that edge from that same edge I just referenced from Tennessee. Like I think his name's James Pierce Jr. or something. I'm not familiar.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with his game, but he must be nice if he's mocked number 1.
Yeah.
But that made me kind of like my initial reaction. I'm a Bryce guy. I think Bryce is going to be good. I think Bryce was put in
Speak on it.
like we look at like this year and we keep saying like Caleb Williams is the best situation for any number 1 overall draft pick, and I think Bryce had the absolute worst. I mean, Bryce Young's number 1 wide receiver was a 32-year-old Adam Thielen who has not been good for 4 years. So
Well, Mingo was a bust too.
Mingo was a bust, and
Jonathan Mingo.
they
drafted to be kinda like
very
the next,
foolishly brought in Miles Sanders, who anybody with eyes could see was a merchant of the the Philadelphia offensive line. He's not good, and that was shown when he
No.
got behind a normal O line in Carolina, and he was absolutely terrible. And then they brought Chuba Hubbard back in, and it's like, okay, guys, what are we doing with
and
this?
they benched and Chuba Hubbard was their starting running back.
Dude,
over him.
and that's what I mean.
He was healthy.
So I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I think that was like. I mean, I dead ass, and I've been a
Yeah.
Lions fan my whole life. I think that was the worst offense I've ever seen in my life. Like, I think that was the worst.
Yeah, I only
offense
watched them once last year.
It was a brutal
against,
watch, dude. It was
New
a
Orleans of all teams.
brutal watch.
Did you watch that game?
I don't remember if I did or not.
I watched them play New Orleans, and it was like, oh my god, I don't know. I mean, I love all kinds of different teams.
Sure.
I love to go way outside of like my usual like schedule
Yeah.
of like, okay, this week I'm gonna watch this. I couldn't get through that
No,
game.
it was
New
bad, dude. It was
Orleans
so
and,
hard to watch.
Panthers. Luckily,
But
it was a Monday
nobody
night
could,
doubleheader. I think.
nobody could. And that was the thing is like, like word to Tyler,
Horrible situation.
word to
for him.
Tyler Beamer. But I just kept hearing all year about how shitty Bryce was, and it's like, motherfucker, his fucking wide receivers can't get open. Who is he supposed? What is he supposed to do? What is he supposed to do? Like,
Yeah.
what is this man
Zero
supposed to do? Oh,
playmakers.
he's tiny. Okay, yeah, he's tiny, but man, fuck, his line is collapsing after 1 second, and he's just looking for Adam Thielen at this point because everybody else is dog water, and
Yeah.
so that that made me like
Which is crazy, right? Remember the meme back in the day? Lions fans know this one where it was like, "Fuck it, Calvin
yeah,
down there
fucking
somewhere,"
Calvin
and
down
it
there
was like
somewhere. Yeah, 100%.
because our O line was bad and we had like no other
Yeah,
players, and sometimes Matt Stafford would just throw like
yeah,
glory balls
yeah,
down to fucking.
100%.
Uh, Imagine that meme, but it's Adam Thielen instead
Yeah,
of Calvin Johnson.
bro,
That's like
that's a
what Bryce was
nightmare.
dealing with.
That's a nightmare
Yeah,
situation.
that's rough, man. That's
So
rough.
I looked at like their offseason acquisitions, and I'm like, all right, like what do these guys do? Because I think Scott Federer, their previous GM, is arguably the worst GM ever. If you like go through and look at his picks, like no hits, very very bad picks, like
Well,
just
and
shit that didn't make sense. Like
horrible trading like
yeah, of
time
course. I mean,
windows,
you
right?
gave
Like trading Brian, like declining a first for Brian
yeah
Burns, then
yeah
trading him for a second, declining a first for
yes
CMC, then trading
yes
him for a second.
trading
It's
for a
like,
second,
dude,
trading
figure it out, man.
giving the Bears Caleb Williams for Bryce Young. Caleb Williams, DJ Moore,
Yeah,
Jalen Johnson, Keenan Allen. I mean, it's like the most lopsided
was
trade
it a
ever.
troll job?
Dude, it's got to
Was
be.
that
I
a
mean,
troll?
Scott Federer should be in jail, like for what he did to what he
Yeah,
did to the Carolina Panthers. But so I looked, they brought a new GM in. I don't know shit about him, but I'm looking at his moves, and I'm like, all right, like let's see what he's got because he didn't have any first round pick. We know that. Because they got Caleb Williams, you bastard.
oh
Hope he sucks, or else
crap.
it's fuck you guys forever too. Um,
Yeah,
but
straight up.
all right, you know what I mean. But they had a
Mm-hmm.
couple of interesting signings. So they brought in Robert Hunt from Miami, who's a guard, and they paid him a disgusting amount of money, but that's what you have to do when you have a shitty team, right? You got to basically bribe people to come here. And then they
Mm-hmm.
also brought in Damian Lewis, who's the opposite guard from Seattle, who is pretty good career in Seattle thus far. Still a pretty young
Yeah.
guy. And then they took Ike Ikwonwu last year, I believe, in the first
Yep.
round, who left tackle,
Yep.
who was I believe from all accounts he was pretty good. I think the line itself was shitty, so it was kind of like it made him look kind of worse because the line overall was not very good. But I'm fairly confident
Right.
that Icky was pretty good himself. And then the right tackle is this dude named Taylor Morton, who's like, he hasn't missed a game. He's like an anchor, right? He hasn't missed a game
Yeah.
since 2018. He's like been very solid. I think their issue was more their guard play than it was their tackle play. And I don't know what the situation is at center, to be perfectly honest with you. I didn't deep dive them this much, but I was just looking at the signings and kind of looking at the line. So I'm like, okay, the line on paper looks like it should be significantly upgraded. And then you look at the weapons, right? Like they drafted Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, who's like a completely dynamic running back who
Love him.
I don't know why.
Love him.
I don't know why he was not talked about in the pre-draft process. It seems like running backs were just like not a thing this year.
Injury last year.
No, I know, but
ACL last
yeah,
year.
but still, you know
that's
what I
why.
mean? Like it seems
No, but
interesting.
he's a dog, dude. He's
Yeah.
better than all the running backs
Yeah,
in this draft.
he was probably
Clearly.
RB1 this year, and they ended up getting him in like the late second, I think. So I think they traded
Yeah,
up for him.
Yeah, he fell.
Um, and I think that's a sneaky good pick. Like he might not be ready by week 1, but man, if you
No,
can get
but-
him in there like halfway through the year, because the expectations are nothing, right? Like there is no expectations for this team.
Yeah.
Like they're not playoff push team. They're not playoff win ready. They're not win the division ready. They just want to be better than the worst team in the league. So you don't have to rush Jonathan Brooks back, right? But now you have a guy for the next 5 years that can really be like a dog for you. And then they traded up to get Xavier Legette, which I think was an awesome move. I think it was an awesome move. I loved Xavier Legette. I was really hoping he would fall to us in the second. That was never going to happen once his tape went out. And he's a South Carolina kid getting drafted by North Carolina. You know what I mean? Like that's fire. Like he stays in the Carolinas. He can be the hometown hero. He's unbelievable. He's like DK Metcalf, but like bigger somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I think the kid is going to be really good. I think he immediately becomes your wide receiver 1. You traded for Deontay Johnson, which I think was a great pick a great trade because of the Legette pick. Because Legette becomes your 1. Now Deontay
only because of
now
that. Now he doesn't have to
100%.
be
It
your
looked
1.
it looked funky before, but now that Deontay Johnson's your
It did.
2 and your last year number 1 Adam Thielen, who's still a serviceable receiver, in no way, shape, or form is he a number 1, but as a number 3, now we're talking. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Agreed.
okay, so
Yeah,
now
of
Bryce
course.
has some weapons to work with and should have some time. And then you look
Yep.
at the defense. Like I still think trading Brian Burns was stupid, but I think he was more of like I think it was more like cut the cancer out. That seemed like it was one of those situations where it was like let's.
Can you blame him?
No, I don't blame him, but
I
I
want out of here.
yeah no, but they have
But
you know
have fun.
they
You're in New York. You're in for the Giants now.
literally, dude. Careful what you wish
Talk
for.
about
Yeah.
failing sideways.
Oh, I swear to God.
But
they
you know, like
have-
failing up.
They
it's
have
like, not
no
really.
100%. That's exactly what
Yeah.
that was. It's like, oh, I get to go fuck because you know what I mean. Like,
Oh, right.
because
Yeah.
Carolina's problem has not been their defense. Their defense is actually pretty good. So they got Derek Brown, who they
Yeah, it
just
was
signed
okay
to a
last
big
year.
extension. I mean, they have Shaq Thompson, who's been holding down the linebacking team for 5-6 years now, if not longer. Like Shaq Thompson's been a solid.
Feels like a long
Yeah, it
time.
feels like a long time.
Underrated.
Very underrated. You signed Jadeveon Clowney, which is a good. If he can be what he was the last couple of years, that's a serviceable bet right there. I mean, he's not any
Yeah.
world breaker, but he's a serviceable vet. You signed Jordan Fuller, which is sneaky good. You got J.C. Horn. I pray to God he can stay healthy because I think J.C. Horn can be very, very good, but he's just made of glass. And we haven't been able to see what he can really be. But when the
Yeah.
moments we have, it's kind of like I was saying earlier with Christian Gonzalez. We've seen a lockdown corner. He just always gets hurt, and it's like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
Put a season together. They have Xavier Woods, another very, very seasoned vet. I love that for the development of J.C. Horn. Just somebody
Yeah.
who's been like a lockdown secondary piece who can kind of like teach the young bull how to like stick it out in there. And then they drafted in the 7th round Mike Barrett from Michigan, who was awesome last year. I mean,
yeah,
I'm
he's a dog.
he's
a dog
a
for
little
us.
undersized, but man, he was a bulldog all year, and I think that
Yeah.
if
You need some of that juice
I
in there
totally
to, like,
agree.
to,
I
to,
totally
to inspire
agree.
the team to like make plays, and he's got a fire. You need a little fire in there.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
So
when you're
I
that bad,
think
you have to have something to
that
play for.
defense could, barring any like major injuries again, like I think that defense could be serviceable. I think that offense could be very
Super
serviceable.
interesting.
So when I look at the thing
Yeah.
and I see them just consistently mocked as the worst team in the league, I don't see that. I see them as more of a picking in the 9 to 12 range. Like I don't think they're going to be good, but
Oh,
I
interesting.
don't think
Yeah.
they're going to be. I
Yeah.
mean, mind you, bro,
They won't be.
just the year before they were picking 9th. That's why they had to jump up to get Bryce.
Right.
Like their team was there. It was
Right.
more they didn't have the quarterback, and then they traded the DJ Moore piece to get the quarterback, and then everything fell apart, and guys got injured, and it didn't work out.
Didn't
But
go well for them.
no, it didn't. But I don't know. I look at that roster and I go, this is not the worst roster in the NFL. There's a worse roster in the NFL. I don't know whose it is, but it's worse. There's somebody who's worse.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I completely agree on the Carolina. Like it's almost becoming like so disrespectful now.
Yeah.
And you texted me this the other day that you were like, all I'm seeing is Carolina. I'm Carolina, and it's kind of funny because I was like, I thought of like doing a segment about this, and I was like, who's like the AFC version of this team that I'm just sort of like I'm seeing as like they're gonna be the last place AFC team, the last place AFC team, the last place AFC team. And they're also being mocked to draft a quarterback next year.
Sure.
And it's funny because the everything you just said about Carolina is kind of how I feel about the Tennessee Titans this year.
Interesting. Yeah.
Again, same
It's
thing.
kind of
it's
very parallel.
I don't think they're going to be contenders. They might finish last in that division, and I don't think it's because they're horrible. It's just that's an indictment on how competitive that division could be this year.
Oh yeah, it's a tough division.
Yeah, you got Trevor in Jacksonville. You got CJ with Houston. You've got AR5 with Indy, and I like those teams more than I like the Titans.
Sure.
So I understand why some people are going there, but it's being taken like Carolina to this extreme level of like, because if it's not Carolina number one in the mock, it's the Titans, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just here to defend I'm just going to defend what you guys consider like everybody's just considering to be garbage. Number one, everybody's upset about firing Vrabel. I thought it was time to move on from Vrabel.
Yeah.
I love Mike Vrabel. I respect Mike Vrabel, but the writing was on the wall. Tannehill was done. I don't think Vrabel was the right fit for Levis's personality. I don't think that Vrabel was the right fit to necessarily move on from the post Derrick Henry Titans era. It's a new page.
Yeah, it is.
So it is. It just is. And they ended up hiring Brian Callahan, who was been working in Cincinnati a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
It's an offensive guy. I really like. I think it's a sneaky good hire. Part of what I like about that hire too is that his dad is Bill Callahan, who's like one of the top offensive line coaches like in the history of football. He's like up there with like Skarnecki. He's just very respected. Which again, I've had to kind of do my diligence of like looking into these guys and like where they come from. But I think it's a good hire. It's not a home run, but I think it's very similar to Canales in Carolina, where it's like, okay, you're getting some offensive juice in here.
Yeah. It's something I didn't even point out.
Functioning. Yeah. I know you didn't, but I'm doing it for you.
Thank you.
I do.
Yeah, it's a huge. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. It's a huge piece.
I love Canales,
is Bryce not kind of like a Baker Mayfield's prototype? You know what I mean? Like they're very similar.
But the thing is like I'm in this weird, I feel like, world now where I have to defend Will Levis as being a good QB potentially.
Yep.
And it's similar to like what you were saying about Bryce, right? Everybody loved Bryce coming out of college last year. We saw the tape at Alabama. We saw what he can do. And you feel like he had a bad season and everybody now is like, Bryce is being replaced next year. I feel the same way about Levis.
Yeah.
He's just being replaced. Levis had like a handful of completely electric, high level games last season.
Yeah.
He didn't do nothing. He didn't come in and get worked like Zach Wilson did his rookie year. He showed flashes. He had some bad games. We don't know that he can play the position in a complete way, but they started off by taking that Latham guy from Bama in the first round this year.
Sure.
You bring in the Callahan father-son combination to try to rebuild this offensive line, retool this offensive line. They were the worst O-line in football last year. Similar to your take about Bryce, I was watching their tape from last season. Levis had
no time.
2 seconds at the most to throw the ball, and he was still making plays regularly. He's strong. He's athletic. He's mobile. He throws a really good football. His arm strength is top notch for some of the younger, really, really good. And so you have DeAndre Hopkins, similar to Keenan Allen. I view him as kind of an old dog, but I think he might have a year or two left. He showed some flashes last season. He's not going to be a star anymore, but he's a good wide receiver to get you into that next level. They overpaid for Calvin Ridley, right?
Yes,
but
they did.
Just like Carolina, you have to do that when you're not a real team.
100%.
And so I like Calvin Ridley a lot as a 1B or a 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
I think he suits Levis's skill set a lot with being able to get open downfield and explosive plays. You had Tajay Spears, who I thought was a really good running back. You added Tony Pollard. You moved on from the Henry era of just, these useless yards that they were doing last season. It was so stale.
Yeah,
and I love Derrick Henry. I think he's an all-timer. But I kind of like the explosiveness and speed and pass catching of the Spears-Pollard combination. Their second-round pick out of Texas, that was puzzling for me, so I don't quite know what that was about.
Yeah.
I don't think they drafted as well. They didn't have as many picks as a Carolina. But they also added L'Jarius Sneed, allegedly. More on that later.
What's the deal with that?
I'll have my guys check on that.
Yeah.
I guess he hasn't signed yet officially or what. I don't know. But assuming that Sneed is in a Titan uniform to start next season, I think he's one of the most underrated corners in football.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
So I look at this team and it's like this has the makings of a team that could absolutely surprise and win 7 or 8 games like the Bears did. Like, you don't think they could be as good as the Bears next year? You think they're going to win 3 games? They're going to be the worst team in football and Levis is losing his job?
Yeah,
I just don't buy it.
I don't see that.
I don't buy it.
I'm with you.
I've seen bad quarterbacks, and that Levis just isn't that.
Yeah.
He's really, really talented, and I like
I saw
they added some really crappy
awesome
veterans.
flashes from him.
Yeah, it's there. It just hasn't put it together yet. But they hired a guy who's just been working with Burrow for years,
Mm-hmm.
and they hired his dad to rebuild that offensive line. So
Yeah.
maybe this guy has a pocket like once a drive.
Yeah. No, that's facts.
You got some weapons. It's not a great
Okay, so
weapon.
they did.
I think
They did.
Okonkwo's a
They
good
did
tight
post
end.
L'Jarius Sneed, so it did get done.
Okay,
For like,
recently though, right? Like
this
it just
was
happened a few days ago, maybe?
just a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago now, but yeah, it was
Okay. Yeah.
for like
So
3.
L'Jarius Sneed is a Titan.
He is officially a Titan. Yep, that's what
Yeah.
I was looking at because
Yeah.
they had announced.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, 7 weeks ago they announced Calvin Ridley, all those signings, and then 2 weeks later they finally announced L'Jarius Sneed. So
Love it.
yeah, there
Love
must
it.
have been something
Well, that
there,
only
but
bolsters my
no,
point.
it does for sure.
I think you have yourself some pieces now, and it's an odd cocktail of free agent signings.
Yeah.
I know it looks weird, but similar to Carolina, it's like let's just get some good
Let's just go get
football
some good
players
football
in
players,
the
bro.
building.
Good football players.
Yeah,
They're out there. Got to pay them.
but I do want to pivot because the last time we talked, we didn't get a chance to like flush this idea out, but
Sure.
it's like super, super crucial. You don't believe in the Philadelphia Eagles.
No, not really.
Yeah.
I don't believe in them.
I know
Okay,
it
but
seems-
let me clarify this. Let me clarify this because I don't want to go on
Yeah, yeah,
record
yeah.
saying something that's not true. I don't believe in
Yeah.
them as they're an NFC powerhouse once again just because they got Saquon Barkley and drafted 2 secondary players. Because that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that they're,
Sure.
they're now the team to beat in the NFC. It's like, okay, but like
It's
the
fair.
Niners didn't really lose anybody and Detroit didn't lose anybody. So like how exactly does that make sense? Like because
So
you guys got
outside of that,
Saquon Barkley and
or
2 rookies, like I
yeah,
don't really buy it. You know what I mean? Even
yeah. So
Detroit went and got
pour some cold water on it for me,
sure.
because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like the Eagles.
Yeah,
I'll
I mean,
attempt to reignite
sure.
it after you pour
Sure.
cold water.
I mean, like I said, again, I'm not
but I'm curious.
I think they could very easily like win that division. I just like it seems to me like from what I'm seeing is just like, oh, they're Super Bowl bound now. And it's like, okay, like
Right.
they got Saquon Barkley, who behind that line should by all means like have a really good season, but 1, he's constantly injured, and 2, they lost Jason Kelsey. And not only did they lose Jason Kelsey, who's the absolute heart and soul of their team, they lost Fletcher Cox, who's the heart and soul of their defense. And you
Right.
could very easily be like, well, yeah, but they're going to replace Fletcher Cox with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. And it's like, maybe. I mean, Jordan Davis has left a lot to be desired thus far in the NFL, in his NFL career. And I just don't think that Jalen Carter is a leader by any means. So who's
No.
really like that? Who's really like that guy on your defense? Didn't they let Hassan Reddick walk too, or did they trade for him? I can't remember what
They let
they let
he's
him go.
gone.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they traded for him a couple years ago. That's right. So he'd been there. DeAndre Slay's washed. Bradbury's washed. Or Brad is Bradbury in who's the cat?
He's
that
still
went,
there.
Who's the cat who went to Chicago that Chicago was all hype about? I
don't think it was Bradbury.
No, it wasn't Bradbury. It was another dude who was on
Yeah.
the Eagles. But their secondary's old.
Oh, it was Barnard.
Barnard, that's it. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or Byard, Kevin Byard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Byard. He was on Tennessee. They traded
Yep,
for him this season. Didn't work out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think there's still a lot of issues with their defense. I do think Vic Fangio can clean that up. And I think that Kellen Moore can probably clean up the offense, but I think their head coach is still a huge question mark. And I think after last year, kind of seeing how it all collapsed, you had to have lost the locker room to some degree. You kind of got exposed as just like a culture guy fraud. So if shit hits the fan again, I mean, I think paying AJ Brown that much money was kind of crazy, and paying Devontae Smith that much money was a little crazy. Especially because AJ Brown has the diva factor about him, and I think that could very easily go south as we saw last year. And I also think that like I'm not like it's hard for me to evaluate like what Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are, because like I think if you look at like the PFF big boards, which Howie Roseman has been kind of exposed as being like the GM who's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna go with like the big board number 1 guy. And it's to be fair, it's worked out in his favor, right? But like I think Nick Wright calls him like a social media GM, which is like he just kind of goes to like Twitter and is like, who should I draft? And everybody's like, Cooper DeJean, and then he's like, all right, cool. Cooper
Yeah, yeah,
Cooper
yeah.
DeJean dropped to the second for a reason. Like
I
I
bet
don't
it's a little more complicated than that, but yeah.
100% it is. But
I'm sure there's more of a
I
process
do
there, but I
think
know what you mean.
it is interesting because he does always tend to take
Yeah.
kind of like the popular names, if you will. A lot of
Yeah,
like a lot of like
for
George,
sure.
like Noah. Who was that? Who was that player? Noah something last year who was out of Georgia. He was a linebacker, and
Oh, I
he like
forgot, but
traded
he
up
wasn't
for
very
him, but he
good.
wasn't very good. And like Jordan Davis has
Yeah,
not
yeah,
been very
yeah.
good, and Jalen Carter's a dog, but everybody knew he was going
He's
to
been
be.
decent. Yeah.
Um, so it's one of those things where I'm like, I think Quinyon Mitchell is a good cornerback who played in the MAC. So I don't know what his level of competition was looking like, and it was a lot of like
Yeah.
a lot of hook routes, a lot of like not looking his way,
Mhm.
a lot of like, oh, this guy's pretty good. We're not even going to throw to his side. Now, granted, he
Yeah.
did ball out in the Senior Bowl, which is like a much higher level of competition. But every dog's got his day. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Can you go do that against the best receivers in the NFL? Can you go do that against CeeDee Lamb every week? Because
Right.
that's what you're being asked, or not every week, but you know what I mean. You're number one every week. CeeDee Lamb twice a year, Terry
Right.
McLaurin twice a year.
Right.
Now Malik Neighbors twice a year. You know what I mean? Like that's not
Yeah.
an easy task that we're asking you to do. Um, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I don't know. I think his bust potential is very high. Not to
Yeah, I think
say
both of those guys have bust
I
potential for
totally
sure,
agree. I
those
totally agree
DBs
because
they
I don't
drafted,
really
but I
know what
yeah.
Cooper DeJean is. Like, are you a safety? Are you a cornerback? If you're a safety, it makes sense why you dropped to the
Yeah.
second round. If you're not a safety, it doesn't really make sense because there was a lot of cornerbacks taken in the end of the first round. You know what I mean? Like, I just doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was cornerback needy teams too. So why did they
Yeah.
pass on you?
Right.
And that's not to say he's gonna bust because he got passed on. I mean, it happens every year, right? We see second round guys go out and be fucking stars. So
Sure.
yeah, Cooper DeJean could be absolutely 100% him, but I don't really know what to make of you as a football player. Like I saw when I go through
Yeah.
and watch like Iowa highlights, I see a lot of you taking back kick returns, and it's like, well, okay, like wait, like wait a
Right.
second, like maybe is that what you were drafted to
Yeah.
do now? Like, are you going to be like the
Your
new
weapon
kickoff
is like
guy?
a Jabril
It just feels like
situation.
no. It
It's
feels
like
like
white Jabril
yes. It feels
Peppers
like
where
white
it's
Jabril
yeah, yeah,
Peppers
yeah. I know what you mean.
and
I get
Jabril
that
Peppers
feeling
was
too.
better than he was in college and has had been a decent pro, but nothing really worth a first round pick.
No. No, I guess yeah, I think something for me that is really important. I feel like all those are really good points. I'm definitely a little sketch on what they drafted defensive back wise, but the point is they did go DB,
Yep.
which was clearly
Yep.
a hole for them last year. So they're taking two swings
Yes.
similar to Detroit
Yes.
of going. This was an issue. Like we can't hang with the big boys if we don't have better personnel. They also brought back our boy CJC from Detroit.
Yeah.
I know that we don't love him,
Yeah.
but I do think for a year at a time, when
Yeah.
he's healthy, he can be a really big difference
Yep.
maker
He
for
can be.
teams. I think the main thing for me, uh, offensively, it's obvious. I like bringing in Saquon Barkley a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's huge for them. But I think it's more complicated than that. When it comes to the chemistry situation, I actually like paying A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And I don't know if you caught this, but I noticed that they paid those guys they paid, I think it was A.J. Brown
Yeah.
right before the draft started,
Yes.
which I think was a chess move by Howie Roseman against the 49ers.
Yeah.
To further disgruntle Ayuk and to
Yes.
up the price, and then to
Yes.
ruin trade value during the draft for San Francisco.
Yeah.
That's just a theory. I have no proof
Well,
of that.
and
But
I
they
think
did.
I think
They're
that's
kind of the anti-Niners, right? Which, but I want to
yeah,
get
yeah,
to
yeah.
this
Go
real
ahead.
quick because I think it matters. Like, they're kind of the anti-Niners in the sense that like they just paid their guys before it got out of control, right?
Mhm.
San Francisco waited too long to pay Debo. He came in the next year, put bad film on tape.
Yep.
They're waiting too long to pay Ayuk now. Trade him or give him his money.
Yep.
Now you're going to pay more money, and you're going to get a disgruntled Ayuk going into camp last year. It's one of the reasons I don't love the Niners. So
Yeah.
they paid their guys. They're bringing back Dallas Goedert. They're bringing back their two wide receivers, and they're both paid. So there's no more issue about
Mhm.
targets, about any of this stuff, because AJ made a big stink last year about targets. And he's got his money now.
Totally.
And Devonta has his money now. They don't have to prove it anymore. Let's just go win games.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts to me had a down year last year and was still a top quarterback in the NFL. So you're looking at a top 5 guy. Anytime you have arguably the best receiving core, a good O-line, one of the top running backs in football join your team, and you have a top 5 guy there who's also a character guy, who's also a leader, I really like that. The big thing that I want to touch on, though, I think a huge reason why Philadelphia struggled last year is not because of personnel, it's because of coaching. The fact that they brought in Kellen Moore on offense and Vic Fangio on defense to coordinate those 2 units respectively, are those home run hires? Maybe not. I think Kellen Moore is the right guy to come in and manage an explosive offense like that, similar to how he did in Dallas. I thought he did a good job in Dallas. Struggled a little bit with the Chargers last year, so it's hard to say. But he's replacing Brian Johnson, who completely shit the bed. I mean, he diarrheaed all over the bed last year with that offense.
Yes, he did.
It wasn't personnel. It was scheme. They were just and I wish I could shout them out because I can't remember. I watched so much YouTube breakdown. But they were running like no motion. They were running low-rate explosive plays out of the backfield. I mean, it was bad. And the tush-push kind of like carried them into wins, ironically.
100%.
So they're not going to have that problem this year, I don't think. Number 2, the person who Vic Fangio is replacing is fucking Matt Patricia. Need I say anything else?
No,
Do I
you
have
don't.
to even follow that up with a comment?
Shout out from Metro Detroit.
Again,
no, you don't.
You're replacing. You're leveling up at running back. You're paying your receivers, so you're bringing good vibes in this year. You have a top 5 quarterback who kind of had a bit of a down year because he lost. Really, I think because he lost his coordinators, not because he's not great. Who's going to be wanting to prove something. You had an OC who we know is good, but failed last year, wanting to prove something. And you fired your 2 coordinators who I believe were the problem because I think Sirianni is a CEO head coach who can succeed with the right coordinators. But Brian Johnson was a defunct coordinator. And I mean, listen.
Boo Brian Johnson.
I don't even want to mention Matt Patricia's name.
Fuck Matt Patricia.
Podcast, honestly. I think it's bad vibes.
It is bad vibes.
So I think moving on from
trash
those
bag,
things,
man.
You get what I'm saying? Like I view them as a contender next year because I viewed them as that last year and coaching got in the way.
Totally agree.
And they got better, I thought. I think offensively, they cleared the air and they brought in guys who I like. Do I love them? Are they home runs? Is it Ben Johnson? No. But I mean, Brian Johnson and Matt Patricia were so bad last year.
Such a disaster.
And you drafted DBs. You're trying
you addressed
to
your
get
need 100%.
Situation solved. So that's the Eagles, and we'll see, right? Obviously the Lions are my pick.
Yeah.
The Eagles are 2 for me, and we'll just see what happens.
Sure.
Are there any other like teams or post-draft related situations? We talked about you not liking Philly's DB picks as much. What other like dynamic is interesting to you post-draft?
So you say Detroit's your 1 and Philly's your 2. My 2 is actually going to be the Los Angeles Rams, man. I love that. I think they retooled like immediately. And I do think
ain't that a bit
man, I fucking hate it.
We're going nowhere.
And okay, so okay. This is this falls on the shoulders of a couple of rookies, but I think their rookies are I think they're such good picks. Their first round pick was Jared Verse out of Florida State. Who was just edge. Like so many people was like Jared Verse, like he could be the first edge gone. He was an interesting player because like some mocks had him top 10, some mocks had him like late 20s. But I truly think he's like a very, very, very elite talent. And not only did they get him, but then they went and paired him with his boy from college who helped him bolster an undefeated shout out to Florida State yet again to bring it full circle, an undefeated defense in Braden Fiske. And I think both of them are absolute fucking dogs. Like you lose Aaron Donald, but then you gain like Aaron Donald back, you know, like
But
so
Fiske, yeah, I was just gonna say Fiske kind of plays like Aaron
100% he
Donald, and
does.
he's not gonna be Aaron Donald. I mean,
No, God,
Aaron
no.
Donald is a once in 50 years. I don't think we've seen Aaron Donald since we've seen Reggie White,
No,
right?
no,
So
no, we
it's like
haven't.
it's impossible to sort of like to do that. But like those two picks do create some excitement, and
They
we're not talking about prime Aaron Donald. We're talking about last year of his career,
Yeah,
Aaron Donald,
he
last
was yeah,
season.
he left
You
a
know what
lot
I
to be
mean?
desired last year.
He did,
It
but he
was
was done.
time. It was time. But
Yeah,
you get
yeah.
these fresh legs. You get you know, we obviously know what Puka Nakua is, and I think somebody who's going to benefit from Puka Nakua being now the wide receiver one is going to
Cooper
be
Kupp,
Cooper Cup because Cooper Cup now becomes your
totally
wide receiver
agree.
two, and he's kind of been like forgotten about, if you will, but he's still him. I promise you that.
Yeah, yeah.
You had Kyron Williams coming out party last year. We've proven to be, you know,
Well, I wanna piggyback off of what you said about Cup
yeah. Go
too.
ahead.
I think the problem with Cup has really the last couple of years just been age and injury,
100%.
and becoming the two helps with both of those issues because you're not giving him 196 whatever the fuck
Yeah,
targets he got during that
yeah.
Triple Crown year, where it's like, I mean, how many times was Stafford throwing him in the ball a game? Like 18
Oh,
times a
it
game.
was
It was like
absurd.
in complete insanity. So he just can't hold up with that kind of
Yeah.
volume being in your 30s. It's just not
Yep.
possible. But he won't have that next year.
Yep.
So it's awesome. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, you had Kyron Williams coming out party last year, proven to be, you know, probably I would expect him to be a top 5 running back this year.
Me too.
In the
Me
league,
too. I'm super high on
he's
Kyron.
really good. And
Yep.
then you went and paired him with Blake Corum, which I think is a
It's
brilliant
the
pick.
right replacement.
I
Yep.
think that Blake Corum was just being overthought. You know, it's like he's small, he's not
Mm.
explosive, he's this, he's that. I don't know. I watched that man carry Michigan to 3 wins over Ohio State and a natty. I mean, I don't know. I'm not
Well,
going to overthink this too much. Like, there's a lot of tread on the tires. I'll give you that. But I think
you know what's
for the
yeah.
next 5 years, man, I think he's absolutely got such high upside. A bowling
I
ball,
agree. You know what's
David
super you know
Montgomery
what's
on
super
steroids. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's super interesting about Quorum too is for me, it was all gonna come down to landing spot. And I mean they even like kind of look alike. Like
yeah,
the landing spot of Quorum, what was discussed with Kyron coming out of Notre Dame is really similar to like what's being discussed with Quorum, right? It's sort of like he's undersized, he lacks like, top edge speed.
hmm
And what we saw from Kyron last year cannot be overstated. I mean, he completely balled last year, and to I don't think Corum is going to come in and take his. I don't think it's going to be a
no,
split backfield, if you will,
no,
but it's almost drafting the perfect backup
yep,
where it's like, yeah, everything you said about me
yeah,
as a 5th round pick out of Notre Dame, I proved it.
yes,
This guy behind me, in a couple years, he's going to prove the
yeah.
same thing.
And
And for
I
now,
also,
it's going to help keep Kyron healthy, which you
yep,
really need in the
yep. And
playoffs.
I think Blake could be a
Yeah.
great like goal line third down back, just to
Mhm.
ease him in
Yeah.
there. But you know, I mean, you know how
Yep.
this game works, right? Like Kyron's gonna get banged up on a play, and he's gonna
Yep.
come out of the game for 2 reps, and Blake's gonna pop off a 60-yarder, and it's gonna be like, oh wait, we
Yeah.
might have 2 here. You know what I mean? Like
All the better. All the
100%.
better.
Like that's just how it goes. So,
Yep.
and they
Yep.
went and like paid a stupid bag for Jonah Jackson. But if Jonah Jackson can stay healthy, I mean, we know we're Detroit fans. Like he's been elite for 5 years for us. You know, I mean,
Well, Sean McVay is so good at building offensive
he's
lines. I mean,
so
they had that
good.
awful O-line year
Yep,
the year after the Super Bowl, so
yep.
2 seasons ago,
And
and
he's
in
rebuilt
one
it already.
offseason.
Yeah, he's
It's
rebuilt it
just
already.
so impressive.
Yeah, no,
I'm with you,
it's
man.
a
That's a
very good
really
line, and
interesting
I
take.
think, and this is all predicated on Matthew Stafford being healthy. So
But you
which
brought in Jimmy G.
you brought in Jimmy G, so you can get through
Yep.
any 2 to 4 week Matthew Stafford hand injury that will definitely happen. Um,
Yeah.
but ultimately, and I do think like I mean how it was so electric this year.
Mm.
Seeing the Rams and the Lions in Detroit to for the wild card game, but like man,
Close call.
could you imagine
That was a close call.
Rams Detroit in Detroit to go to the Super Bowl? I mean, wouldn't that like
Oh, it
we
would be
thought this was
amazing.
poetic justice? Could you imagine that poetic justice?
But the game was a lot closer than Lions fans are
Oh,
willing to really
I
discuss,
totally agree.
honestly.
And
And it's like,
and you know what?
I think they only got better this offseason.
So let me elaborate on that. I think that if the Rams end up winning that game, I think they beat the Bucks, And then I think they go into San Francisco and give them just as good of a
Me
fight.
too.
I don't think they win.
I think they beat San
No, I
Francisco.
don't think they beat San Francisco. I think they probably lose
On
to
the
San
road, maybe
Francisco.
not.
But I think
Yeah.
it's a very similar game. I think it's a very similar game where it's very, very close.
It's interesting you bring them up because I agree with your Rams take
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Fuck Matthew
Not just
Stafford, by
because
the
I
way.
love the Rams.
But yeah.
Yeah,
We don't
fuck Kelly Stafford
we don't
more.
100%. We don't rock with
That's
Matthew
why E
Stafford around
robbed
here.
you.
Shout out E for robbing you.
That's why E from Entourage.
Shout
That's
out
why Vinny
E.
Chase's
Shout out
fictional
E.
friend robbed you of tens of thousands of dollars.
So you're annoying.
let me get out my petty bag. So part of what I love about Los Angeles next year has to do with, right, similar to how we said with like situation, right?
Yeah.
It's like I don't love San Francisco next year,
No.
and I feel like I'm in a loony bin because everybody is like penciling them. Kind of similar. How do you feel about
Yeah,
Philly?
Philly,
We disagree there, but I feel that way about San Fran.
Sure.
And maybe they do one more next year, but I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, Kyle can't win the big game.
Nope.
And he's not really a player guy. He's kind of the anti-McVay, where it's like it's system, there's a certain sort of coolness and aloofness from Kyle. He's not a personality rah guy.
Nope.
So already there's kind of been some murmuring, and this is all hearsay, that there's a little bit of losing the locker room energetically feel going on in San Francisco. He tends to overwork his players, and the problem with that is they become injury prone. The other problem with that is he has a front office that isn't paying these guys quickly. So you're getting these older injury prone players combined with these sort of disgruntled, why don't I have my bag yet players coming into next season. Debo, or something very small but sort of interesting thing happened this past week where Diana Rossini, who's a really good reporter, apparently was interviewing Debo about the Ricky Parasol pick. And she was like, are you excited to maybe he's going to be your replacement or whatever. And the way she reported it was he said it is what it is and was like disgruntled. And then he came out on Twitter and was like, LOL, like that's a lie. So it's hard to know what to believe, but I don't think Diana Rossini would put that out there if it wasn't real.
She would.
I think Debo saw it.
He's
was
trying
like,
to save
I look
face.
like a dick. Yeah. And so you've already seen what Ayuk has said all offseason. Even if you pay Ayuk now, there's already been a certain amount of damage done of like he saw Ridley get paid. He saw fucking Jerry Jeudy get money.
Yeah.
He saw Devonta
Jerry
get paid.
Jeudy getting money over him is crazy.
Yeah. It's so you've had Debo trade rumors. You've had Ayuk, is still, he might be a holdout situation.
Yeah.
And then you're really fucked. If you get down to that, then you're screwed.
Yep.
Christian McCaffrey is going to be 28 years old this year.
Yep.
27 typically tends to be the end, and 28 tends to be the kiss of death for running backs being elite. Maybe he's got one more year yet left. That's if he can stay healthy in Kyle's offense. You can just look up the numbers. People who are maybe like a little better at that than I am, of like looking up, like having like the nerd data with pie charts in front of you. I would venture a guess that he had one of the all-time high modern era running back usages last year.
Yeah.
And that went into the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So we're having a full regular season of high usage, full playoffs of high usage, playing in the Super Bowl, losing that game, coming back this year. Can Kittle stay healthy all year? He's another year older. Their secondary is trash.
Yep.
Like, I'll say it. Their offensive line is old now, right? Their anchor offensive line is in his mid-30s. And what else do they have on that O-line that's spectacular? And they didn't really hit a home run with the O-line in the draft. They drafted Ricky Parasol, who we already discussed is, fifth on the depth chart next year at with their first-round pick. No huge free agent sightings of note that you can look at and go, wow, that's a needle mover. I just don't like them next year, and I don't think their quarterback's that good.
No, I'm so with you.
He ain't no Matthew Stafford.
No, he is not. No, he's not.
So it's interesting.
And I do think the division.
I don't like the Rams partially because of that.
Yeah,
I just don't like I don't like.
Well, I think their division got a lot harder, man. I think their division got a lot harder.
and hungrier.
that it's funny because the two teams you think of in that division as kind of like the bottom feeders right now are like the Seahawks and the Cardinals, just like on paper, right? You're like, okay, like I think the best two teams are the Rams and the Niners, and then you
Which is true.
yeah, 100%. You have to like pencil in 3 and 4, right? So you're like, okay, like probably the Seahawks at 3, and then probably the Cardinals at 4. But the Cardinals got a lot better on offense just with Marvin Harrison.
Hell yeah.
And then they took
yeah.
who was that running back they took?
Trey
Trey
Benson.
Benson. Yeah.
From Florida State.
They got
he's coming.
yeah, they got the fucking tight end. They got they got some pieces on
McBride.
that offense. And then
Yeah, dude.
like juxtapose that with the Seahawks, who they got a defensive head coach, like one of the best defensive young minds we've seen in a minute in Mike McDaniels.
Yeah.
And they loaded up in the draft on defense. Like they got some boys.
Did.
So and then the last draft they got Devin Witherspoon. They don't have a quarterback. Their offensive pieces are they're aging out a little bit, but they still, they still have high end. They got the Jack Charbonnet last year. They got the Kenny Walker a few years ago. And then they got Devin Witherspoon last year, and then this year they went and got Byron Murphy in the first, and then they got somebody else in the second that was like such a good pick. Excuse me while I look this up. Because
no, it's okay. And I love that you have Jackson Smith and Jigba there last year as a first-round pick because Tyler Lockett's just about done. Noah Fant was also a first-round draft pick years ago.
Yeah.
So he's like not a scrub at tight end either. So, I mean, they have pieces on offense. I don't view them as any real threat in that division this season.
No, I don't believe that either.
But the Bears were trash last year and they won 7 games.
Yeah.
So it's like I think Seattle could win 8 games or 7 games this
totally
year.
Agree.
And it's like if you steal one from the Niners, that might be the division.
Yep.
And it's interesting, right? Because we just don't know. I think that you and I, and I'll put a bow on it with this,
Sure.
right? I think that you and I right now feel like
it was the Leonard Williams trade that I was thinking of. So you got Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy. It's a nice little D line, bro. With the Devin Witherspoon in the back, like that's and Tyreek Woolen, like that's some core pieces moving forward.
It is. I think the other element of it too is we think about so many things on paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I think you and I both like the Rams next year over the Niners is because we feel like all things being equal, it's going to be close, right?
Yep.
But then comes the question of, all right, for all the marbles in a dogfight, do I want Matt Stafford and Sean McVay, or do I want Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy? Who do I trust more next year?
I want Matt Stafford and Sean McVay every time.
So do I.
Yeah.
So do I. And I think that's the difference. And I think it's going to be close. I'm not saying that San Francisco is not going to be good next year. I just don't love them like you guys do anymore.
I totally agree.
I totally agree. Vibes.
Yeah. Yeah,
I love the vibes in LA.
I think we're seeing a very much of like an Andy Reid situation with Kyle Shanahan right now. I think this is kind of the end of the leash for the Niners, where I think, we saw the end of the leash with Andy and Philadelphia.
I think he leaves.
Yeah, I do too.
Think they fire him.
I think he leaves, and then I think he probably goes to a better-ish situation, a different situation for a few years, and then he similar to
he gets his one.
Yeah, similar to because I'll never be sold that he truly wanted Trey Lance. I think he wanted. I don't know what he wanted, to be honest with you. I think,
but again, he did. I think was a huge part of the reason why Trey failed, because he doesn't have that personal people thing with players as well.
Yeah.
But he's a hell of a ball coach, man.
No, he is.
He's put all these teams, John Lynch is a good GM.
He needs his Pat Mahomes, you know what I mean? Which is like,
that's exactly what I'm getting
doesn't
to.
everybody,
He has never had a franchise quarterback with the 49ers. They haven't had a franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
And you guys go ahead and sell me on Brock Purdy being a star. I'm not buying it.
No, I'm not buying it either.
He's not a star.
No, he's a game
manager.
No, he's a game manager.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's going to be a really, really interesting race in the division next year. But yeah, man, on that note, I'm going to let you go.
Perfect.
I think we should, give these if anybody's still with us, I think we should give them the farewell. And
of course.
Yeah, man, it's good talking.
Oh yeah,
it's good talking.
every time, man. We'll get it.
All right,
we'll
brother.
get it in next week.